Black Mirror is a British science fiction show which premiered in 2011. In contrast to many other shows, individual episodes are generally self-contained, each telling their own, usually dystopian story about humanity's future. Despite the self-contained episodes, there is a common theme running through the entire series, focused around the negative impact of modern technology such as social media, smartphones, or video games. This episode of Black Mirror, called The Entire History of You, is essentially about the relationship between the main character, Liam Foxwell, and his wife, called Thea. The action takes place in a futuristic society where everyone has a so-called brain, which makes it possible to record everything they hear and see. This technological invention has a great influence on the character's life, since it is now possible to show the actual proofs of everything that has happened in the past. But in the end, Liam decides to remove his brain since it mostly caused him pain rather than success in life.
Mm, Using Freytag's model, the story can be divided into different sections. We had the exposition where we are introduced to Liam, our main character. He arrives at the house and we immediately sense a strange atmosphere, but it's hard to tell exactly what's going on. We get a feeling of a romantic relationship between Jonas and Fee, possibly an affair. Throughout the night, we learn about the grains and what they could do. And Liam notices how his wife acts towards him and Jonas, and he suspects an affair. And then we have the rising action, and Liam continuously confronts his wife with stored memory that exhibits examples of her saying and doing things that imply she's having an affair or has feeling for Jonas. And you could say that this future society both shows how useful the grain can be, but also how destructive it can be. And the conflict between Fee and Liam moves further along, and he keeps showing her memories and asking questions about her past relationship with Jonas. And then eventually Fee goes to sleep, and Liam gets drunk, and in the morning he goes to Jonas's house and forces him to delete all his memories of Fee. And the climax is when Liam returns to the house and he saw something on Jonas's screen which could indicate that Jonty is not his child. So he wants Fee to play her memory of that night she had sex with Jonas in order to prove that he wore a condom and that Jody couldn't possibly be Jonas's child. And she shows her the memory, and then we have the fall in action, which is after they see the memory. And the episode cuts to a shot of Liam replaying memories from all over the house, and it is very clear that he misses Fee and their child. And lastly, we have the denouement, which is when Liam goes to the bathroom and cuts out the grain.
Yes, and I'm going to talk about the first scene we've chosen to analyze, which is the opening scene. And this episode begins with Liam, the main character, sitting in a big company and he's being interviewed for a job. And afterwards, we get introduced to the grain, and he's sitting in the cab watching this interview over and over, and he's rewinding it and zooming in on the different details and people sitting in the room. Yes, and we kind of get this different perspective on the world. Yeah, instead of they have a different way of interacting with each other, and instead of like sharing fun stories and memories, they simply just play them to other people. And obviously, this includes technology, which is very typical for sci-fi. Um, and the first thing you see at this interview is how the camera is held. It's handheld and it's from the perspective and like height of the interviewer's head, like his eyes, so we can see what the grain records, which is quite interesting. And in the interview, we are also presented to what is definitely a difference between our world and theirs. They're talking about like what the kind of job he would be doing, and then they're talking about this specific case that often arrives in this company that they deal with. And there's a story about this child who sues his parents for like poor treatment of him and how it's led to his low self-confidence. Yeah, the the grain obviously records everything they've ever done or seen, and now they can use this against even their own family. Um, yeah, and right after the interview, you hear like happy and um, you hear hopeful and happy music, which is um, which stands out and is really in contrast to the rest of the episode where it all like quickly begins to unravel and everything goes wrong. Uh, yeah. Uh, Also, there's a commercial in the cap, which is like an upgrade for the grain. And the slogan for this company who produces these grains has the slogan "Memory is for living," which is kind of ironic, as considering this memory destroys Liam's life because he wouldn't even be able to confront his wife about all this if he weren't able to like uh, cling on to every little detail. Um, and there's also an element of cognitive estrangement when they use this grain because their eyes go like dark and creepy and gray. And this gives us like this shock of recognition because obviously we can still tell that it's Liam or whoever else is using the grain, but they're different and creepy to look at. It's very uncanny.
So next up, we have an analysis of the climax. In this scene, the conflict between Liam and Fi reaches its climax. From the beginning of the scene, it is clear that Liam has changed. He has a distant, despondently facial expression and leads off the dialogue with asking, "Did you use a condom or not?" This question, as well as "Am I Jodie's father?" indicates that he suspects her of being unfaithful and that he is doubting whether he is the true father of their child. The two characters react in different ways, with him being unnaturally calm in opposite to her hysterical reaction. The scene escalates with him yelling, "Show it to me!" and pushing her to the bed when she refuses to show him the clips from her memory. We then finally see Fi giving up and showing Liam her memory of her and Jonas having sex. The scene is extremely uncomfortable and long, as we see quite a long shot of Liam's empty facial expression, as well as Fi looking completely broken, while we hear the moaning of Jonas and Fi. This scene is a great example of what this seemingly great invention, the grain, has done to Liam. He becomes obsessed with finding out what Fi has been doing with Jonas, and until he gets to the bottom of it, he acts relentlessly. It's clear that the grain affects their emotional life, and that this is shown as we see less trust between Liam and Fi, and that people generally have a need to always see what the grain shows if they're doubting whether or not someone is telling the truth. Other examples from the film are we see Fi watching a sped up recording of The Babysitter after the night out where Liam meets Jonas. This also shows that even their own babysitter, they have a lack of trust to. It's kind of a dystopian future we see. We also have a sex scene with no feelings or real passion, and we can see in their eyes that they are watching their earlier sex lives. This also adds to the fact that it is very dystopian and an alienated feeling.
So, science fiction is the major genre of the story, though it can be argued that there is an existing subgenre of romance. And John G. Coelty, he argues that the obstacle can be a love triangle in the romantic genre, which is the case of those plotline plots. The main theme is love and relationship and how to solve the problems in it. So it differs from the romantic genre in the ending, though, because Liam and Fi break up, and Liam gets depressed, haunted by the memories with Fi. And the typical ending of romance is a happy ending, which ends up with love between the ones who are supposed to be together, and monogamy. And in some way you can say it ends up with monogamy, since we no longer cheat on Liam, but the ending is not happy. So the unsatisfied ending is probably traced from the dystopian track of science fiction that this story follows, and therefore it can be argued that the entire history view is a combination or aggregation of two different genres, dystopian and romantic, according to Aleister Fowler's theories on genre development. So furthermore, Aleister Fowler's counterstatement is represented in our point above. The counterstatement of genres means basically that the genres become directly anti-typical, and the text does the complete opposite of what this typical type of text usually does, which is the exact case of this anti-typical use of the romantic genre. And there, according to science fiction, there are two crucial elements. There's this science fiction as a form of fantastic literature, and also science fiction which entails an element of speculation, like what if, and it poses a question. And this episode of Black Mirror belongs to the second type of science fiction, where it poses a question. It poses this science fiction's the what if genre aims to prevent the future it shows, and here a world where you have a brain that stores your memories. That's the case we deal with. So it poses this question: is it only a good thing to remember everything, or can it be a plague to the individual? And there's also this theoretician, Dr. Savine, who explains his concepts novum and zero world. And novum is like a new situation that is alien from the situation we know. It's uncanny and close, but it's still alien. And zero world as the world of the spectator or the reader. So the world in Black Mirror is mainly built as the society we know today, and it is also in the near future, though there are alien memories which are mainly represented by the brain implants, and that make these implants that make the characters remember everything. And in this way we get to see our own world, society, zero world thing through a new perspective. And it can also be argued that there are traces of Leo Marx's concept "the machine in the garden," which destroys the authenticity of the world by allowing technology to become too big a part of the society. So somehow the brain implants control the life of our characters because they use them in such a grand scale.
This episode of Black Mirror also deals with the cyberpunk, which is the idea or concept of how much, or more like a question of how much technology can be a part of the body before it's no longer a human being. But the episode doesn't deal with it that much. It's just a little, since it kind of speculates whether this brain implant is an upgrade or downgrade for human beings. And it also has a dystopian element, in the sense that everything looks fine, so it's not that evident, but the relationships between people are kind of going through a hardship. And also, or lastly, the theoretician Etienne Auchet, he means that science fiction should prevent, and this is very good in this context, because in the beginning the viewer is very amazed by this new technology, but as the episode progresses, this downside of the brain and its ability to destroy relationships becomes more and more clear through the viewer, because, as mentioned earlier, you can rewind and watch memories over and over, and you can just like zoom in on every little detail, stuff you shouldn't even be able to remember anyways. Yeah, so that's why this is kind of like, this should prevent. It might be cool in the beginning, but it has a lot of downsides.